Tom Foreman, thanks so much for bringing us that. So with all that in mind that Tom just laid out, let's have our next discussion with Jennifer Rogers, who was a federal prosecutor, along with Jamil Jaffer, who was once chief counsel and senior advisor for Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the same committee that Menendez now chairs. Jennifer, I want to kick it off with you here because you also once worked for the Southern District of New York. And in comparison to the 2015 charges against Menendez, which included bribery and allegations that he accepted luxury trips, how do these charges laid out in today's indictment stack up?
Well, it's a different office bringing them, Pam. First of all, the evidence is much stronger. But most importantly, the facts are just very, very different. In the prior case, the problem was, and I think why jurors disagreed ultimately, the person bribing Menendez was a close friend of his with a prior relationship. And the bribes themselves were not cash and gifts like they are here. They were trips that they were taking together, trips on a private jet, trips to the bribor's luxury residences. So I think a lot of the jurors thought, well, maybe those trips were taken because they were friends, not because of what Menendez actually was doing for the person bribing him. Here it's totally transactional. There are a treasure trove full of texts and emails laying out what these people were asking him to do. He and his wife agreed to do those things, and then some of those things they actually did, and in exchange, they got cash, they got gold, they got a Mercedes. So the transaction is laid out very, very clearly, making it much easier this time around for prosecutors to prove this case.
Yeah, prosecutors in the indictment clearly went out of their way to try to illustrate the official acts that they allege Menendez took in exchange for the gifts, the money, these gold bars you see pictures of on screen. Jamil, with that in mind, the Senate Foreign Relations chair, he allegedly, quote, secretly aided the government of Egypt as part of that. Yet, for his part, Menendez said in his statement, prosecutors, quote, misrepresented the normal work of a congressional office. What do you think?
Well, it's exactly right. I mean, this is the challenge, Pam. He's going to argue that all of the things that he did were what senators do all the time. They look into these deals. They assess whether they're in the interest of the United States, in the interest of their home state, in the interest of the government agency that's involved, and whether it makes sense for the U.S.'s relationship. The U.S. obviously has had a long-standing economic and military supply relationship with Egypt, even during the coup that took place in Egypt a few years back. We ultimately did provide Egypt with military assistance during the pendency of that coup. And so, Senator Menendez is going to argue, look, this was sort of normal order of the course. Now, the challenge, of course, that the prosecutors are going to bring in and going to put in front of the jury, right, is, look, he also ostensibly took all this cash. The problem is, as Jennifer and you were just talking about, they've brought charges against him in the past. And Jennifer's right, these charges are very different. But Menendez got 10 out of 12 jurors, according to at least one juror in the last trial, to believe that he wasn't guilty there. He's proven he can withstand these. We're going to see what happens going forward.
So then let's dig in a little bit deeper onto that, because the indictment lays out all this evidence that prosecutors gathered to show the gifts that he allegedly received along with his wife. And the indictment also includes the mention of fingerprints a few times as part of verifying or that this evidence they collected, the money, the gold bars, was a direct gift from the three businessmen. So walk us through that, if you would, Jennifer.
Yeah, so he's going to have a hard time getting out of this. And one of the reasons is that even if these are things that he would have done anyway, even if he's really pro-Egypt just by his own policy, even if these are things that, he would have done in the normal course, if he also was getting this money and that was a tiny, tiny part of why he was doing it, then he's guilty of these offenses. So it's going to be hard for him to say, with all this money coming in, tied very clearly to these people who were asking him to do the things that he was in fact doing, that wasn't any part of the reason that he was doing it. So, this seems like a very, very strong case to me, so different from the first case. And of course, the jury won't know anything about the first case. They won't know that he almost got off of these charges. They'll only hear what's within the four corners of this indictment and what happens in the courtroom.
But I want to just follow up on what you said, because you said these gifts tied very directly to these businessmen. Walk us through how prosecutors are laying out that case, that these gifts, that the money and the gold bars that they collected in his home through execution of a search warrant is tied to these businessmen, and it's part of the bribery scheme.
So some of it is through the text messages and emails. I mean, the wife especially was in constant contact with these people talking about what it was they wanted Menendez to do and what they were going to do for her. They gave her a no-show job. There's paperwork related to that. She opened up a specific bank account to put the money in from them. There's documentary evidence of that. There's fingerprints of one of these businessmen, co-defendants, on an envelope in which some of this cash was stashed that the authorities found during the search warrant execution. So there's a lot of that kind of evidence, Pam.
Yeah, and allegedly prosecutors say either the businessman or his driver, according to the indictment. Do you think, Jamil, that Menendez can weather this one too and survive this? What do you think?
I mean, look, it's a tough call. I mean, I think Jennifer's right. This is a very strong case the prosecutors have ostensibly brought. Now, again, Senator Menendez is entitled to the presumption of innocence until he's proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. That's going to require the government to bring all this evidence that they've put in the indictment and bring it to bear and convince a jury unanimously that they've proven their case. He's beat these cases before. I agree with Jennifer. It's a very different case. That being said, the fact that they had surveillance on his wife, they had a court-ordered wiretap in 2019, back in the early days of their relationship, before they even got married, they were already surveilling her phone. So they clearly had a sense something was afoot. If they can bring all that evidence to bear and it's directly in, the wife's voice and her text messages, they can tie this money directly to events that happen. It's going to be a very tough case for the prosecution to bring, a tough case for Menendez to beat as well. We'll see what happens.
We will be watching this very closely. Jamil Jaffer, Jennifer Rogers, thanks for bringing your legal expertise and analysis to the forefront here. Well, Senator Menendez says forces behind today's charges are trying to dig his political grave. That's also what he said back in 2017 when his corruption case ended in a mistrial. How the indictment this time around could also spell disaster for his Democratic colleagues. Plus, the new CNN poll in a battleground state showing a preferred candidate dominating the 2024 race, and it's not Donald Trump. We'll be back.